Our first storyteller of the evening may or may not have told a story here before. It might have been a while, I'm not sure. But I'm expecting great things. Her first name is Nikki, and I just confirmed that her last name is Nogani. Please put your hands together for Nikki Nogani.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, transformations. So it took me a while to think of a story because when I think of transformations, I think of like Clark Kent going behind a building and emerging as Superman, or my mom turning into the Hulk every time someone mentions Trump. And so it took a while because I feel like it's something that happens immediately, and I am a very stagnant person, and I pride myself on it. Like, I have been pretty much this, like, kind of high energy, pretty awkward person since about, like, the first grade. And the only person who probably beats me in terms of, like, not changing over time is my grandmother. And my mom's mom is just like a rock. Like, she has been, in my memory, the same person forever, and probably before I was born. Like, I can only imagine her as this person. And she's my favorite. Like, I know I shouldn't have a favorite grandparent, but she always was. And my other grandmother knew this to the point where, like, when we would go visit Iran once a year, both my grandmothers were there, and they both lived in different cities, and we had one grandmother, my mom's mom, my favorite, who we spent more time with, and the other one who we only spent a week with. And the other one would literally, like she tried everything to get us to stay longer because she knew that we liked the other grandmother more. So it got to the point where she would buy, like, hundreds of Tom and Jerry CDs to try and get us to, like, sit at home, and, like, she got to be with us. And she even tried, like, animals. Like, we owned several sheep, bunnies, and ducks in my lifetime just because she was, like, that desperate. And this other grandma always won. And I think it's because she has this philosophy where she says, I'm never gonna ask for your time. If you want me, you'll come to me. And just something about that kind of liberty in a family that was always equating love with being very not controlling, but very tight and close. It was just like a breath of fresh air, and I loved it. And this grandmother, my mom's parents specifically, lived a very nomadic lifestyle for many years. They had all of their children move out of Iran for obvious reasons. And so they themselves were situated kind of everywhere, where they would spend a few months at a time in Iran and then start their travels in about September and go spend a month with one kid and 2 months with the other and just kind of travel the world and end up right back in Iran exactly when we would go visit them. So it was really interesting. And a few years ago, my grandfather was diagnosed with Parkinson's. And it was this very slow transition into a very stagnant lifestyle for him, like very much stationary kind of person already. He loved watching movies and stuff, but suddenly it was like a difference between him choosing to do that and him having to do that. And then it all kind of climaxed when he got this back surgery. And after the surgery, something just went wrong, and he ended up having to move somewhere for a long time, and it ended up being Madison. So we got them, and I was super excited because my favorite grandma was now in the same city as me for a long period of time, and that was awesome. But having this grandparent kind of slowly withering away with this Parkinson's was really tough to see, but my grandma was always this very positive person, again, really making the transition easier. And so I had no problem when I left about a year ago to live abroad. And I came back recently. I don't think that much has changed. Like, I wear better shoes now, but for the most part, like I said, very stationary person, so pride myself on not transforming all that much. But my grandmother actually changed a lot, which was really interesting for me because I had always assumed it would be my grandfather, to the point where I was ready to book a ticket in case something went wrong. And to come back into this life that I'd known and see this person who I'd always thought of as my rock be so different was very uncomfortable for me. She was not necessarily a chubby grandma, but she was fluffy. I loved her for it, and suddenly she, throughout the year that I was gone, had developed this dementia and this memory loss, and so she would forget to eat and had lost a ton of weight. Her hair started she used to have curls just like mine, which I also loved because everyone would say that we looked the same, and I thought she was the prettier grandma, so I was like, I'm gonna look fantastic in a few years. And so suddenly she was just frizzy everywhere and white hair. There were all of a sudden all these wrinkles I'd never noticed, and now my life too has changed because I see how much help she now requires, and she was always the one who was helping others. And I think the thing about transformations then is not necessarily the time period, because for me, I'd always had gaps of my life where I wouldn't see people for a year, and I would see them change, but I never acknowledged it. I think it's just the potential for change that we have in us. So although my grandfather was the one with Parkinson's, the thing about having, I guess, a spouse or a family member with a sort of disease that you know is getting worse is that, well, you know the trajectory, so we never even saw the dementia coming in. And so transformations, I don't know which is better. I wish she hadn't changed, but also it's really interesting to see what it's like to have someone who never needed any help now asking for it, to the point where she no longer can say, you come to me when you're ready. It's become more of a, I need you, so please come now. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikki. You can't really say anything funny after that kind of story, so I'm not gonna. Okay. Our next storyteller, I said her name wrong today on the video I put out, but I'm not, and I said your name wrong as well on the video I put out, Nikki, just so you know. I said Nugani, like nougat, but it's not. No, it's not. It's Nogani. That's how I'm going to remember from now on. It's not nougat. You guys are fun tonight. Our next storyteller is going to be great as well. Heather, have you told a story here before? No? All right. Our next storyteller has never told a story here before. She's much more sure of it, Nikki. But again, I'm always expecting great things. So please put your hands together for Heather Andreessen. Clap one more time for Heather.
I'm a short one, gotta bring it in. Thank you. All right, so not only have I never told a story here, I've never been here before. So check out the lady balls on me, just saying. My story is not quite as sweet as the former one, although it is a downer. So there's that. Just a content warning, a dog does get hurt in this story, so if you don't like that, maybe, scroll through Facebook. So, my story. When I was young pup in Mississippi, I was in kindergarten, 6 years old, just as cheeky and delightful as you see me here. My brother, who is 18 years older than me, would always take me on the weekends. Give my parents a break. They were older parents, so they didn't need a little 6-year-old running around their heels while they were trying to watch Matlock, basically. So my brother took me to his house in Alabama, and every weekend he would rent me whatever movie I wanted. It was, without fail, Rainbow Bride and the Star Stealer. I mean, come on, classic. So he rented Pet Sematary. His wife rented The Terminator. The 80s. So we get back to his house, I'm eating my little corn dog and fries, watching Rainbow Bright. Perfect. Then we get to The Terminator. I really didn't need to see the future governor's penis, but hey, at 6, you gotta learn sometime. Then the tragic moment came. Well, the first one. My brother put in Pet Sematary. And I don't know if you guys have seen this movie, but it's really not appropriate for a 6-year-old. 103 minutes later, my life was changed. Gosh. So my dad came and picked me up the next day or 2 days later on Sunday. My dad was not the best kind of father in the world. He was kind of abusive and kind of a dick. So, I mean, it's funny he was a dick, come on. So he picked me up. We get to our house. We lived out in the country. Whatever you're thinking Mississippi looks like, you got it. That's where I lived. So we are in the middle of Mississippi and driving in this gravel road, and we get to close to our driveway, and all of a sudden there's this thud. And I thought that we were going to die because I was 6, and it was a scary sound. And then I hear this wild keening, just utter pain. I could hear it. It was terrible. I start sobbing immediately. I don't even know what happened. My dad gets out of the pickup truck. He walks around to my side where he had hit whatever he had hit. He picks up this animal off the ground. And I can see it from the window. I mean, he's feet away from me. And it's my dog, Princess. He'd run over my dog. He threw her in the ditch. Remember, I told you he's a dick. He throws her in the ditch, gets back in the truck, tells me to stop crying, and we go home. I spent the night in my room, didn't eat dinner, cried myself to sleep. Very sad 6-year-old Heather. So I get up the next day for school. My mom gets me ready. She sends me down our very long driveway. It was literally 1/8 of a mile long. This is important later. She tells me she loves me, she's sorry about Princess, and that when I get home, she'll make cookies with me. She was in nursing school at this time, so she wanted to make sure that she got a nap in before she had to go to school. So she sent me off to wait for the bus, because again, it's the 80s, y'all. You can send your kids 1/8 of the mile down and let them stand there by themselves when they're 6. And she locks the door behind me so she can nap. I walk slowly down our driveway, get to the end, I'm down there kicking rocks, twirling around, making my backpack do that centrifuge thing. Y'all know. And all of a sudden, I fall down because I spun a little too long, and I hear this kind of yip, and I look over, and again, I'm sprawled out in the middle of our dirt driveway, on my butt, a little 6-year-old. And I look behind me, and it's Princess. She is mangled beyond belief, and she is missing an eye. I immediately start screaming, "Mama, mama, mama, pet cemetery, mama, pet cemetery." I run all the way that 1/8 of a mile, ran. Fastest I've ever run in my life. I probably will never run that fast again. Y'all see me. I am no Flojo, all right? So I get up to our trailer. I start beating on the back of the door because my mom had locked me out. She comes to the door. She's like, "What is wrong?" She thought that like some man had come and tried to touch me in my bikini places. No, it's just my dead dog back from the dead. So she's like, "What, Heather, what's wrong? What's wrong?" And then she sees Princess running behind me because she thought we were playing a game. So of course she ran after me the entire 1/8 of a mile up our driveway and is now jumping up on me, trying to get me to love her. Poor baby. But again, traumatized 6-year-old. My mom sees the dog, freaks out, pulls me inside, and is like, "I don't know what to do." And I had never heard my mom say, "I don't know what to do." I mean, can you imagine? You're in kindergarten. You've never heard your parents say that. They know everything. Not that day. So my mom calls my dad. It's maybe 7:30 in the morning. He's been at work about 4 hours. So on his lunch, he calls my brother-in-law. Like I said, I'm the youngest, and my eldest brother is 18 years older than me. The next one's 16, the next one 10. I'm definitely the baby. They're all married by the time I was 6. So he calls my brother-in-law, and they come over after work. I stayed inside all day with my mom. Neither of us went to school. They come and get Princess to take care of her because they don't want her to suffer. And what they do is they take her to my brother's house because they live way further in the country than we do. And they own 40 acres of land of a forest. So they were going to take her in the woods and shoot her because it's the 80s and the country, and you don't take your animals to the vet to have them euthanized. They take her away, and about 2 weeks later, I go back to my brother Johnny's house for another weekend trip and more Rainbow Bright. We get over there, I get out of my brother's truck, and there's a dog jumping up on me, and I'm like, oh my God, it's Richie, which is my brother's little chihuahua. So I was like, I reached down to pet Richie, and it's not Richie. It's Princess. She's still missing an eye, y'all. They had taken this dog out in the woods, shot her point blank in the head, and left her there because they thought she was dead. How does this happen? So, of course, I start screeching, Pet Cemetery, Johnny, please, Pet Cemetery. I jump in the pickup bed of his truck. I'm still not sure how I did it. I swear I leaped like this. God. So, again, Johnny calls my brother-in-law, and he's like, come on, we got to go take care of the dog again. So they shoot her again, point blank in the woods. The dog does not come back to where I see her. But when I was about in 9th grade, my sister mentioned to my brother Johnny, she said, Johnny, I haven't seen Princess lately, have you? While I was there. And of course, you know, I'm in the 8th or 9th grade, 14, 15. I'm like, what'd you say? Princess what? And they tell me that all these years, Princess has been living in their woods despite them shooting her point blank twice. They bring her food. They made her like a little shelter. She just lives in the woods, y'all. So this dog lived a good, long life because my parents got Princess before they had me. She had to have been like 18 when she died. So basically what I'm trying to say is there were a lot of transformations happening in this story. Sometimes there's a zombie dog. Sometimes you're scarred for life. But either way, much like our first storyteller said, you can't stay stagnant. You have to keep changing, and transformation is part of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. I don't know what the hell that was. That is scary as hell. Yeah, you can't stay stagnant. You got to keep changing, even when people shoot you in the head twice. I just love that, like, Princess, that was the name? Princess just lived this long, healthy life, except for everybody who tried to kill her several times. Like, at what point do you stop trying to kill this dog? She doesn't want to die. That is horrifying. Do you see this sexy sweatshirt I'm wearing? It's a nice segue, right? Just put my hood up. Go buy one. Normally they're $40, but we're gonna sell them for $30 tonight because we need money for this GoFundMe. So if you want a cool sweatshirt, it's $30. We're getting towards that like chilly weather, right? Not tonight, it's hot as all hell. But you need a sweatshirt that says Madison Story Slam, what's your story? Our next storyteller is a wonderful stand-up comedian here in Madison. We're doing some switch-ups. Rebecca, if you were expecting to go next, you're not. You'll be after our break. Originally, you were supposed to be now you're not. Our next storyteller is a wonderful stand-up comedian here in Madison. You can often find him at the Comedy Club on State. He runs a thing called Glib Showcases, Bittersweet, tons of awesome stuff. Last night, I think he was at the Cabaret, I think it was last night. He's told so many good stories here. Some of the most artfully funny yet endearing emotional stories I've ever heard here at Madison Story Slam. So you're in for a treat, I hope. No pressure, Tyson. Please put your hands together for Tyson Purcell.
Thank you, Adam. All right, guys, I'm going to tell you a story that's kind of a long time in development in the aspect of, I don't think I could have told this story today had not something happened even as little as a week ago, or maybe a week and a half ago. I'm going to start off kind of like when I was a kid. So when I was a kid, you know, you hit puberty and your body changes and your mind changes. And one of the things that changed for me was I started getting depressed, and I didn't really realize it, like what that actually meant. So it's when the depression sort of set in and something kind of changed in my brain. And I think that, like, when we talk about depression, sometimes we focus on like, oh, sad and not being able to get out of bed and stuff like that. But for me, it's just like this trait that I think is trying to make me a better person because it doesn't really allow me to forgive myself for anything. So I tend to kind of look at my life as something to be improved upon, I guess. Like, it's not quite good enough for some reason. One of the ways I like to think about it is like climate change deniers. Like, you know that you can show them the science and the facts and the truth about, yeah, climate change is a thing that's happening. And then they tell you, yeah, well, it's still cold in the wintertime. They just don't really feel it. That's the kind of the way that I am with my self-worth. Like, I know on paper that there's a lot of good about me and that my life has value. Like, I'm not going to tell someone, no, my life is worthless, because I know it's not true. But at the same time, I don't really feel it. So it's probably about somewhere between 15 and 20 years ago, and some of you have probably heard me tell stories here before and may know that, like, when I was growing up, my dad, you know, while he was in the home, he and I weren't really close. And I kind of had a chip on my shoulder about it, but when I got to be legal drinking age and I could go to the bar and kind of see him where he was meant to be, like that was his natural habitat, I got to see who my dad really was, and it was great. So I feel like I met my dad at the bottom of a pint glass, and I don't mean that in a terrible way at all. Like, that's where we got to bond, and I really got to know like the charismatic, helpful person that he really was. So one night we were out drinking, and we got a pitcher of beer, and we filled up our pint glasses, and we set them in front of each other, and then we raced to the bottom. And it was the first time I ever beat my dad to the bottom of a pint glass. So we both slammed, and I got it done in 3 seconds, and he got it done in 3.5. And he turned to me, and he looked me right in the eyes, and he said, "You're the greatest thing I've ever done." I was like, "You really like to drink?" I mean, like, that's kind of what was in my head. Like, I think he was trying to tell me he loved me, and like that's what I kind of took away from it. But like, it was like, okay, that's nice. It's nice that you got to say that to me, because he wouldn't really tell me he loved me when I was growing up. He was just that kind of a man. He just couldn't say those sort of things. So he told me that, and it just kind of stuck in the back of my head. So that compliment he said to me was just what it was for like 15 or 20 years, up until about a week and a half ago on the first day of school. Took my daughter, first day of 4th grade. She's 9.5, dropped her off, met her there actually. Her mom took her to school. And, we take the pictures of the first day of school, and she's sitting there smiling, and her mom and I have been divorced for a number of years, but it was at that moment I had this kind of bittersweet pain, kind of like I just wanted to reach out and grab the mother of my child and give her a hug and be like, wow, we really created someone special. Like, my daughter is a delight. She is added to the world because she's funny and she's caring. She's smart. And she makes the world a better place. And I was just like, oh my God, she's so amazing. And these words echoed inside my mind. You're the best thing I've ever done. And it was at that moment where that thing my dad said to me at the bar at the bottom of a pint glass was transformed. And I finally understood what he meant. The facts are, I'm probably a decent person. I can share things with people. I'm a good friend. I try to make the world a better place. And while I look in the mirror, and I don't feel it when I look at myself, boy, do I wish I could love myself the way my dad loved me. And it transformed how I thought about myself. Now, I don't think that I'm ever going to be able to kind of look at myself the way that he saw me, because we're all just built the way that we're built. Sometimes when it comes to depression, you'll punish yourself if you tell people, yeah, I'm fine, and then they say things like, oh, just fine? No, fine is good for me. But that week ago, when what my dad said 15 or 20 years ago was transformed, it made me think differently. And boy, I sure do hope I can love myself the way my dad did someday. Thanks.
Thank you, Tyson. Someday, you guys should find Tyson and ask him about his dad and softball, because it's wonderful. There's a great story on an old episode of the podcast about Tyson, or that Tyson told about his dad and softball, that you should listen to. Our next storyteller is always funny. You can find a great story that she told about like a boyfriend in Africa, right? That was like the first story you told. It was a wonderful story about being cheated on. Please give your warmest round of applause for Rebecca Mandich.
Hey everyone, I'm the girl that got cheated on. Thanks for the introduction, Adam. No, it's okay. So, I want you all to make some noise if you are from the great state of Wisconsin. Let me just say, I am from the great state of Wisconsin. I am from Green Bay. Go Packers. Yes, thank you. Yeah, and I love Wisconsin. I think we are such a great state, and there's so many things that we do really well. Beer, cheese, football, a weekend at the lake. We know how to do this stuff. But there are some things that people from Wisconsin are not very good at, myself included, and the main thing I'm thinking about right now is directness and confrontation. So I think that we're like really, really scared of offending people. Like, we don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. We don't want to be a burden to anyone. We don't want to be direct. So like, this leads to us just being very indirect and oftentimes getting roped into things that we don't really want to do. So like, you know, if someone were to come up to you in an alleyway and be like, hey kid, you want to try some meth? It's really easy it's really easy to be like, no, thank you. I would not like to try your meth. But I want to give you another scenario that is like a person from Wisconsin's personal hell. It's Friday. You've been looking forward to the weekend all week long. It's like, it's 4:30, your eye is on the clock, you are ready to go home, all you want to do is just watch Netflix and chill. And then one of your coworkers comes over and it's like, hey, are you going to the team building thing at 5? And you're like thinking in your head like, oh my God. Like this team building thing is the last thing I want to do in this entire world. Because I do not want to spend my hours outside of work hanging out with my shitty boss, Greg, and hearing about his kids' softball tournament. So, but, I mean, you're thinking this in your head, but then you're like, okay, but team building, so if I don't go, does that mean I don't want to be a part of the team? Is everyone going to be really passive-aggressive towards me and really cold towards me? And the next thing you're like, yeah, I'm going to be there. I mean, these are hard life lessons. Being direct is hard. And I had to start learning these life lessons when I was in high school. And I will never forget, like, a very specific day where I learned this lesson. So in high school, I was kind of a weird kid. Anyone who knows me, big shocker, I was a weird kid. I'm still weird. It's just what it is. And where do the weird kids in high school congregate? Theater, band. Yes, I was in both. Double crazy. Double crazy. Yeah, so I'm going to talk about the band. Well, I'll probably tell another story about theater another day. But I was in band. I played the tenor saxophone. I sat in the second row of band, and right behind me was the trombone section. And in the trombone section, there was this kid named Chris. And Chris would just do these really annoying things to get my attention. Like he'd throw spitballs at me, he'd kick my chair, he'd just do stuff like that was really annoying. And I know some of you are like, oh, but if he does stuff like that, it means that he likes you. No, it means he's a turd and he's annoying. So Chris, the very annoying turd, one day was sitting behind me in band, and I was getting ready to take a trip to go to Kenya that summer. So I had this box of candy bars sitting beneath my chair because I was selling candy bars to raise money. And then in the middle of the band, I'm very soulfully playing my tenor sax, and he kicks my box of candy bars to get my attention. And I'm just like, not today, Chris. But that on the inside, I just feel my inner demon she-dragon. She opens her eyes. And on the surface, I'm just like, okay, keep it cool, keep it cool. I turn around and I'm just like, give him a look, hey, you better knock that off. But didn't say anything. But meanwhile, the she-dragon was awake. She was lurking. And then another minute goes by, kicks the candy bar box again. And then I'm just like, oh, sweet Jesus, take the wheel. And I turn around and I'm like, not cool. So, this is the conflict, is that I have an inner she-dragon demon inside of me that wants to murder this person, and yet I'm from Wisconsin, so I have to repress it. And I'm just like, yeah, not cool, come on. And then, what happens next? A couple minutes go by, he kicks my chair. And then I'm just like, oh, God. And that's when the she-dragon starts to speak to me, and she's like, deal with it. And I'm like, no, no, I'm not going to do this. And she's like, do it. And I was like, okay, this is where I start negotiating with the she-dragon. I'm like, okay, well, he's doing this because he wants attention, so I'm just not going to respond to this, not give him the attention. So I just don't respond. 3 minutes go by without anything. And then what happens? I start to hear a very loud conversation that he's having with the other trombone player next to him. And he's like, why is she selling candy bars again? And the other guy was like she's going to Kenya. Like, don't you remember? She's trying to raise money. And then he said, like, Africa? Why would she want to go to Africa when she could come to my house? And that's when the she-dragon spread her wings. And she was like, do it, destroy him. And I was like, no, I can't, do it. I'm like, no. And she's like, fine then. And that's when a transformation took place, and the she-dragon manifested herself in my body, and I turned around, and I was like, Chris, I'm going to Africa because there's a less likely chance that I'll get AIDS there than at your house. And then after I said it, I woke up, and I was like, what happened? I have no recollection. But the trombone section was in uproar over the sick burn that was dealt. So that day, I learned a very important lesson, and the she-dragon and I made a negotiation together that either I could handle being direct and having confrontation in a healthy way, or she would continue to manifest herself. So 95% of the time, I would say I'm like, I can be direct and have confrontation and still, you know, be a kind person. But there is that other 5% of the time where someone really just crosses all my boundaries, and the she-dragon's just like, tap me in, bitch. and I gotta do it. So, yep, that's my transformation.
Let's hear it once again for Khaleesi. I had to text my wife, and I was like, Khaleesi is the name of the person from Game of Thrones, right? Dragons? Okay. Is this tall enough for you? Let's check. Yeah, it's good. All right. Our next storyteller is also a comedian here in Madison. And his first time that he told a story here at Madison Story Slam, he told one of my favorite stories that doesn't get enough attention, in my opinion. He told a story about his computer being stolen after he paused a good porno movie. And his heartbreak at the fact that he wasn't going to be able to finish it. Please put your hands together for Seth Rabin.
Good evening. How many of you guys like to do karaoke? Isn't karaoke great? You know, you get to go up on stage, feel like a rock star, and perform in front of people. Well, I got to experience something very similar. I'm gonna tell you guys a story about how I transformed into a rock star, to some degree. Now, a great story for me to tell you would be, I went to a Foo Fighters concert, and Dave Grohl broke his wrist, and I went up on stage and played a couple songs on guitar, and I saved the day. Would you guys like to hear that story? No. Good, because it never happened. All right, the story's a little bit more realistic. When I was younger, I was getting into music, I was really into boy bands, I couldn't figure out who was better, Backstreet Boys or NSYNC. It's a debate that I'm still working on today. All right, it's debatable. But then around the time I got to 9 or 10 years old, I started getting into actual bands, guys that could play their instruments, and I got into harder, edgier bands, guys like Blink-182 and Green Day and System of a Down and Linkin Park, all these bands. And when I got to middle school, I hooked up with a friend of mine from 3rd grade. His name was Aaron. And Aaron was a really cool guy. He was ambitious and was really enthusiastic about any opportunity that went his way. If he had an opportunity to do something, he would do it. And I remember, in 6th grade, I would see bands, audition for the local talent show. And I was just thinking, man, that would be so cool to do someday, to perform in front of people. So the very next year in 7th grade, Aaron and I went and saw the School of Rock and Theaters. And we were just blown away by it. The music, just the whole history of rock. And it was so mesmerizing to see. And I remember when we were leaving the theater, I told Aaron, we got to start a band, we got to get something going. The problem was, when you're in 7th grade, you don't have much money. You don't really know how to play your instruments. I mean, I could play piano and I was learning guitar, but there wasn't really much going on. So we finally get to freshman year of high school, and we started getting some money. I was able to start playing on the electric guitar, getting some songs down. Aaron got enough money to play the bass, and we started to rehearse together, and things were starting to come about. And we came across an opportunity. In our town, there was this local showcase at the local bowling alley that a Friday on every every month, local bands could come and, place, 15 to 30 minutes of their songs. It was called Limelight Cafe, and Aaron and I were like, let's get some songs together and really get this thing going. Let's perform. So we practiced some songs together, and we were really confident in ourselves, like, yes, we can do this. And so the day comes. It was a Friday night. Plenty of people were there. The crowd consisted of, high school students from all over the region. Well, not region, but like the towns that were around the bowling alley. And so Aaron and I were really confident. We were set. We had our songs, and we had probably the most kick-ass name ever. We were coming up with different ideas, and I came up with the name. Our mascot in our town was the bison, and I came up with the name the Bored Bison, B-O-R-E-D. Intimidating, right? So we get to the show. It's packed. Our time comes up, and we're ready to rock. It's a huge crowd. It's in this big hospitality room that you would have birthday parties in. And I'm standing right there. I got my guitar and the microphone because I was singing. Aaron's over here. He's got his bass, and he's got his microphone. And we didn't have a drummer, so we basically grabbed a friend of ours named Josh. I got my old keyboard from when I was younger, and I told him to just press some drum beats on, play like a drum track on it. The problem was, it was not loud at all, and nobody could hear it. So we had our 2 songs. One was a cover, and another was an original. The cover that we did was Damn It by Blink-182, and it got a good ovation. It got a good, reception from the crowd, and that was great. Now, the next song we did was an original that I wrote. This shows you how bilingual I really am. You know the term El Diablo, which means the devil in Spanish. Well, I decided I was going to mix things up a little bit and call it the Diablo. I was pretty proud of myself that day. So I get into the song. I'm playing this really cool riff that I came up with. And as I'm playing the riff, the crowd separates. And one half of the crowd goes on one side of the room, and another half goes on the other side of the room. And the riff that I had just built up the intensity. And I said 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then bam, the place just went nuts. Like the crowd just got into it. The mosh pits were going everywhere. I should also point out there's a moment where I forgot to mention both Aaron and I's parents were at the show, and my dad was recording it on his video camera, and he has this moment where he pans across the room, and there's actually a moment at the show where some guy who was standing on the outside of the crowd just gets suckered into the mosh pit. It was crazy, but awesome. And so we get through the song, we perform, Aaron and I are just elated and just so proud of ourselves. We set out to perform, and we did it. So the few days go by afterwards, and I come to realize that we're kind of a controversial band at this point. Because we used to have this website called MySpace, and we had our own band page on it, and the comment section that we got was interesting. Half of the comments were like, "You guys were great, you guys kick ass, keep doing what you're doing," and then the other half was, "You guys suck, quit while you're ahead, you don't know anything about punk rock." But you know what? Aaron and I wanted to continue doing this. We had a strong passion for playing music and performing in front of crowds that we just kept on doing it for the remainder of our high school years. We had different lineup changes, we had different band names, but at the same time, our exposure got better and we started to do a lot better each year. We started doing more Battle of the Bands, we started doing variety shows, and there's actually a picture of us when we were a fully complete band in the Daily Herald, which is a huge newspaper in Chicago. There's like a full-colored picture of us. And it was really cool, and we were able to stay together as a band until, we got to college and we went our separate ways. But I still keep in touch with Aaron to this day. He's doing his thing, I'm doing my thing, and we're still being creative, and we're still, showing, what we could do creatively. I consider myself a man of many regrets. There are a lot of things in my life that I wish I could have done differently, or things that I wish I did do, and a lot of them were definitely in high school. I wish I could have played on a sports team in high school. I wish I could have gotten straight A's for a semester. I wish I lost my virginity junior year when I had the chance. But I'll tell you what's one regret I don't have was I can't look back and say, I wish I could have played in a band and, been able to play some good music and play in front of big crowds. Because I did that. And in a way, it's helped me develop into me performing today, doing stand-up and doing storytelling events like this one. So it's something that, I'll always cherish for the rest of my life. And as I leave here tonight, I'm going to take a quote from the School of Rock, which they took from AC/DC. "We roll tonight to the guitar bite. And for those about to rock, I salute you." Thank you very much.
Thank you, Seth. I don't know what to say when somebody wishes that they wish they lost their virginity sooner. I don't know what you say to that. Our next storyteller got here late, but I'm glad you did, James, because I believe in you so much. I'm just stalling until he gets closer to the stage. Can you tell? Everybody, our next storyteller is James. Is it Dolan? Am I saying that right? All right. It's James Dolan, so please clap for James Dolan.
Yeah, that looks good. Thanks, guys. So, my senior year of college, I learned that I had a shitty superpower, which was I could become a different person, just in the way I looked. I didn't stop being an asshole or anything, but I did, over winter break, shave my head and grow out my beard for the first time. And when I got back to campus, nobody recognized me. When I saw people that I knew well, I got the double take, and then the slow, you could see the gears turning, the slow dawning of realization, oh yeah, I do know that guy. The people that I did not know so well would seriously just come up to me like, hey, I'm Kevin, nice to meet you. Thanks, Kevin, we've been playing intramural soccer together for 2 years, but yes, it is nice to meet you. The worst part was, my family did not even recognize me after this change in hairstyle. We were all meeting up for the holidays at the Chattanooga, Tennessee airport. Not a great airport, just for reference. But I see my sister coming through security, and I go up to her to give her a big hug, and I get the blankest, most who is this motherfucker look I have ever seen. It took her a full 4 seconds, at least, to realize that, yes, I know this person. I am, in fact, related to this person and have known them my entire life. I didn't realize that the impact it would have of a new hairstyle. That wasn't my goal at all. But I guess I can see it. Like, nobody had seen me for a while, and then I show up, and my hair is in different places. But for me, it felt like a long time coming. Like, it was building for a while. Like, the beard, I think, was just laziness. In high school, it started as the neck beard, which you got to shave because that's a terrible look for everybody. But as I spent 4 years getting a civil engineering degree that I have not once used, the hair slowly crept north, stopping just short of the eyeballs. And then senior year, I, go in to shave, look at myself in the mirror and think, I could do nothing and this would look fine. So obviously I did nothing, and this is the result before you today. The hair took a little longer. Like, that was for different reasons to get around to it. It turns out that if you start going bald in your 20s, this is the only available hairstyle. For all the podcast listeners out in Iraq, I have gorgeous, long, flowing blonde locks. They're beautiful. But the reason it took me so long to do this was I was in denial that I was going bald in my 20s. I would do anything to not accept the fact that I had this slowly expanding bald spot up there. I was essentially a flat earther for not going bald. But when your cousin starts making fun of the fact that you have a bald spot in your 20s, you might be a redneck, but you might also be going bald, just for reference. So that was kind of the come to Jesus moment, the time to face the music. So I went to Target and bought myself a pair of $20 trimmers and just got rid of it all. I was hoping that I could be lazy about this, the beard, now I don't have to shave anymore, except, well, now I do. It turns out that shaving your head once a week, every week, is a lot more effort than getting a $12 haircut at Great Clips every 6 months. And up to this point, I wasn't really a person that ever spent any time on my appearance. I wore a lot of cargo shorts and cargo pants and ironic t-shirts. But once I started doing it for a while, I kind of realized I liked it. Like, I liked looking how I wanted to look. That, to me, was a bigger transformation than just the new hairstyle. Was that now I kind of gave a shit about how I presented myself to the world, and realized that life is a little more fun and a little easier if you actually engage it. But yeah, that's all I got. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, James. You gotta love a guy who's in slacks, a dress shirt, like a button-down dress shirt, but his tennies, he's prepared to play a basketball game at any moment. But they match his friggin' shirt. I mean, that's amazing. Our next storyteller is one of my favorite human beings in the world. I'm not going to give him some big introduction because you're going to find out for yourselves. He's wearing an amazing shirt that you could own yourself. Please put your hands together for Marty, the Meat Man Sosnowski.
Hello, Madison. Iran, come on. Hey, what do you think? The Meat Man and the Ayatollah. Come on, Iran, you gotta have me there. Bring me to Iran. I want to meet the Ayatollah. We need to do a storytelling thing together. There's no doubt. Tonight I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself, about how I got here, because it seems to be that anxiety issues in our life seem to be a prerequisite of being up here, and it seems to be one of those things that, because Adam's right, this is so helpful. It's been such a transformation to me. So tonight I'm going to tell you a little bit about my DNA, my makeup, and what has transformed me and got me to this weird place. My two grandfathers, which I've told you a little bit about my one grandfather because the one thing we had in common was we used to grow weed together. So he was my favorite, to say the least. And my two grandfathers were my two heroes, and they couldn't have been any more different. Yet they were the same. They were great men. They were hardworking men. They brought themselves up. They were self-made men. Both grandfathers quit school in about the 8th grade, had to go to work on the farm. This was back in the 20s. My one grandfather from Detroit, he worked his way up to be an engineer at Chrysler with no education. My other grandfather, on my mom's side of the family, he worked his way up to be a boilermaker in Dow Chemical Company, no education. Both hardworking men, hunted and fished a lot, taught me so much about the outdoors. So they were very similar in very many ways, but yet they were so different in so many ways. And I think it was kind of the DNA thing between the two that made me who I am. And like the Dragon Lady, I'm a weird guy, man. But unlike the Dragon Lady, my weirdness has stood the test of time. So we had my one grandfather on the one side who I told you about a little bit. We were very close, hunted and fished a lot. He was my hero. My mom's dad. He was Irish. My mom's grandmother was Native American, so you had the Native American-Irish mix on this side. On the other side, it was pure Polak. Sosnowski, that's my last name. Louis Sosnowski was my grandfather. His wife was Regina Fransky. Solid Polacks on that side. So you mix the two together, the Native Americans and the Polacks together. My mom's brother used to call me running dummy. That was his joke. He thought that was so funny. And it was funny. It was meant to be funny. So that's how I kind of I had this mix of all these things. Now, both grandfathers meant a lot to me. My Irish grandfather, he was different though. He was really cool. He accepted people for who they were. He didn't really have any prerequisitions about anybody. And this was back in the 60s. He used to call black people smoked Irishmen. He said, they're just like me. He said, only they're just a different color. He said, they like to drink, they like to fight, they like to have fun. He goes, they're just like the Irish. So he called them smoked Irishmen. On the other side of the family, I had my other grandfather who I respected equally. But he had some hatred in his heart that was sad. And he lived in Detroit. And it was a sad thing, and this is where the transformation comes in, because as a little child, as 7, 8, 9 years old, 1968, we go to visit my grandfather in Detroit. This is a memory that I have. And it was always exciting to go there. We go to Detroit. They live in the inner city of Detroit, big houses in those days, big porches. We get to the house, and I go in the house, and there's my grandfather sitting by the front door. And he's sitting there by the front door and he's looking out on the street. The riots in Detroit had just happened. And they were pretty much over. Had been about probably 5 or 6 weeks since the riots had happened. And I go in the house and there's my grandfather sitting in a chair looking outside, and the guns are out. He was a big hunter, so it wasn't unusual to see guns in the house. So I'm 10 years old. I think, oh my God, we're gonna go shooting. I go to the trap range and we did stuff like that. Cool. So I go running in and I go, Gramps, are we going to go to the trap range and do some shooting? And he goes, no. He goes, I want you to sit down, son. He goes, come here. He said, I want to tell you something. He goes, I'm going to tell you something right now. And he said, you know what? He said, we're not going to the trap range. But he says, you know what? He said, the first damn black man that walks down that street, he said, we're shooting him in the head. And I was like, and I didn't use the word that he used because, you know, that's my transformation. My transformation is I'm vowing that my family never, ever talks like that again in their lives. Never uses that word again. Because he was, as much as I loved that man, that was the sad part about him. He had the hate in him, and I don't know why. Never did get to find out why that hatred was there, but it was there because he hated everybody. If you weren't Eastern European, he didn't like you. He had names for everybody, bad names for everybody. But yet he was still a great man. It was just something about him. But we needed to make that transformation. And I feel that I've come so far in my life, and now one of our new storytellers who isn't here tonight, Charles Payne, he's become one of my good friends, and I've made those transformations, and I'm going to make sure that we don't have that hate in my family anymore. So, to end my story, all I want to say is to all the haters out there, move over because you're standing in my light. And to my grandfather, I love you, man, but I'm going to give you the meat man who's number one now salute, motherfucker, because we don't need the hate. Thank you, Madison.
Thank you, Marty. Here's what I'll say about Marty. He will surprise you every time he's up here. I mean, he just will. Like, man, that's so cool. I love you, Marty. You don't love me back? Our next, Jessica, have you told the story before? You have, but not a ton, right? You've been here many more times than you've actually told the story. I will say this about our next storyteller. She is regular, and she is a supporter of what we're doing, and she really believes in it. And so anytime that she tells a story, I'm like psyched about it, because she's here every month. I love you. Put your hands together for Jessica Regan.
So the people who know me best know that I have a great collection of quotes that I keep that bring me a lot of clarity and joy, including the one that goes, "I wish my life had background music so I could understand what the hell is going on." I like that one a lot. And what I've realized is that especially in those moments of major transformation, life does give us these little clues to help us understand what the hell is going on. And for me, there have actually been 3 specific instances where it's taken the form of background music. So Greg Lavoie is a speaker and author of the book Callings, Finding and Following an Authentic Life. And Greg was the first one to introduce me to this idea that some of our truest callings can come to us in the form of songs that we can't quite get out of our head. As it turns out, there is a lot that you can learn about your situation and how you feel about it and what you should do next about it based on the songs that you find yourself kind of absent-mindedly humming to yourself. Now, I, for one, constantly have a playlist going on in my brain at all times, and so I just want to clarify what I mean specifically by this idea of background music. So, for example, lately I have been deliberately choosing to play the entire soundtrack of Dear Evan Hansen on my head on repeat throughout the workday because that's been my jam for a really long time. I'm going to see it in New York next week, and I'm really excited, and there's nothing else I want to listen to. This isn't that. It isn't also the really pointless, annoying songs that we're familiar with that go blaring in our heads at inconvenient times, like in the movie Inside Out, where that Triple Dent gum commercial just kept showing up over and over. It's not that either. And it's also not even that song that you find yourself humming as you're cooking dinner, but then you realize, oh, it's because I heard it at the grocery store a few minutes earlier. The songs that I'm talking about are the ones that have kind of crept up out of my unconscious really softly and unexpectedly and super randomly. And if I'm lucky enough to even notice them, they're the songs that catch me off guard and give me pause and teach me something new about myself. And so the 3 examples that I mentioned are ones that are kind of fun because they weren't even songs I really knew. Obviously, I'd heard them out in the world before, but never really paid attention to them or thought they were anything special. But they were the ones that, again, kind of really pushed up through a cluttered mind and really helped me make sense of things in a way that I hadn't been able to make sense of them before. So, for example, this happened most recently this past summer. My subconscious presented me with the perfect Kesha song of all songs that really helped me find peace and make sense of a sticky situation that I wasn't quite sure how to navigate. So thanks, Kesha, for that. And a year and a half prior to that, the most perfect Goo Goo Dolls lyrics showed up in my brain kind of unexpectedly. And it happened just 10 minutes before I got a phone call that a close friend had passed away. And I feel like I needed that music in my mind at that moment to really prepare me to receive that kind of news. But I want to tell you a little bit more about the first time this ever happened because it really caught me off guard. I wasn't expecting it. And this gives you a little bit of a better idea of how this all works. So in the summer of 2015, I was out walking the dog around the neighborhood one evening, and I heard this noise that sounded like da-da-da, and I didn't even pay much attention to it. It sounded like the sound was on repeat as kind of like a car alarm going off in the distance somewhere. And so I didn't really pay much attention to it, but I kept hearing it, this da-da-dun, da-da-dun. And finally, I realized it was coming from inside my own head. I was like, whoa, what is that noise? So then I started listening more curiously and paying closer to attention to it. And I kept hearing this da-da-dun, da-da-dun, and realized there was more to it. Suddenly, I started hearing this da-da-dun, da-da-dun, da-da-da-dun. And since I'm a really great hummer, some of you maybe already know what this song is that I'm referring to. And I don't know the mechanics of how any of this happened, but lyrics started filling in. Again, this isn't a song that I consciously knew, but eventually I started hearing da-da-dun, da-da-dun, like I know you do. That gave me enough information to go to Google and type in "like I know you do" lyrics and found that the song that I had been hearing in my head was Move Along by All American Rejects. Great song. I bought it on iTunes and I added it to a lot of playlists that serve a lot of different purposes, but It made so much sense to me once I started thinking about what Greg Lavoie had said about making meaning from the songs that you absent-mindedly hum to yourself. It made so much sense that I was humming Move Along to myself in the summer of 2015. When I look back on that time, I think of it as a period of major transformation. I remember describing the angst that I was feeling in summer of 2015 as feeling like I had reached the end of my script, right? So I had just turned 30, and I felt like I had done all of the things you're supposed to do as a woman who's gotten to that age. I had finished all of my degrees, and I had built a rewarding career and gotten married, bought a house, came to terms with infertility, and I was living a good life. Everything around me was great. I loved my marriage, I loved my city, I loved my career, and yet I felt ready to run far and fast from any or all of those things to find some relief from this feeling of stuck that I was facing in summer of 2015. And I found that really hard to describe. I found that really hard to make sense of, and I felt a lot of guilt around feeling stuck in a really good situation. But I talked to a lot of people about it. Long story short, I took a lot of really purposeful, deliberate steps that I'm really pretty proud of to find some clarity around those things, to be able to explore some of this tension I was feeling behind the wanderlust of wanting to consider something different, but then also embracing the stability that I had created in my life. And I found myself really exploring further about how to distinguish between what I wanted for myself and what I admired in other people, and realizing that those can be different things, and that's fine. Eventually felt like I was fully capable and qualified to write my own self-help book about how to get unstuck when you're feeling like you're stuck in a good situation. But things turned out great. I did eventually move along in terms of my career. I took a different position in 2015, and I felt like that was a really good move for me. It gave me a fresh start in some respect, but still embracing that stability of living and working in Madison. And even looking back, I feel really foolish now to think like I had forced my own transformation upon myself because I was, I guess, bored, maybe, I don't know. But since then, realizing that even though it seemed like I had done all the milestones I was supposed to have done, that there is still all sorts of new adventures, all sorts of new people, all sorts of really amazing experiences that I didn't have to necessarily force upon myself or deliberately kind of go seek out, that these things are gonna happen and continue to happen. And one of the great friendships I made through the career change that I made that summer, she and I reconnected recently, and she shared that she also had kind of faced a little bit of this tug away from Madison, you know, loving this place and loving the city, but wondering about the what if of somewhere else. And I asked her, so how did you come to terms with that? How did you make that decision to stay here? And she shared what she had told herself. She said, get your shit together, girl. You've got it pretty good. And I thought, wow, I wish that kind of clarity could come so easily or seem so simple to me. But in a way, I'm kind of glad that I'll just be looking for that next song to keep me nudging along and making sure I'm on the right track. Thanks.
Thank you, Jessica. Our next storyteller of the evening is very wonderful. Most oftentimes when I introduce him, I reference some older stories that he's told. But I don't want to tip the hat at all. I'm going to try and let you get away from your regular theme without putting it on you. But if you want to know about his sex life, go find our old podcast episodes. With that said, please put your hands together for Zachary Shea. I meant to say this. Our next, we're going to redo his whole intro. Ready? Our next storyteller believes in Madison Story Slam so much that within the last hour went to GoFundMe.com/StorySlamLive and donated money. Please give your hand to Zachary Shea.
So I, even as I was thinking up the story I wanted to tell, tonight, sitting here, I was unhappy with the word I was trying to come up with to describe myself in middle school. Asshole is the accurate word, but it's just not jarring, harsh, or comedic enough. And I was racking my brain, and like like Moses from the mountains, one of our storytellers descended with a single tablet simply with the word turd. And I was like, oh, I was a turd in middle school. Not the same kind of turd as the, to be gentle gentleman in your story. I was a bit of a jerk. I was bullied. I think most everyone was bullied in middle school to varying degrees, and I don't want to give you the impression that I somehow had it worse than the average middle schooler in 6th or 7th grade. So much that I didn't take it as well as the average middle schooler probably does. And that turned me into a bit of a turd. All right. Which in turn invited more bullying, of course, because, you know, it's more fun to poke the kid who explodes than who doesn't. I get it. I see the entertainment cycle that is the bully's thought process, which led to me getting picked on even more and more. And as I get into 8th grade, I don't have a lot of friends. I've got basically one friend. I've got one period of the day I really enjoy. That's English class. It's the one class where I get any sort of positive validation because my teacher sees something in me, I guess, so I cling on to that desperately. You guys can laugh at the self-deprecation. Like, you don't have to be nice. So I cling to that, but my parents and the school is getting really sick of the other 4 periods in the day when I'm an awful human being and people are awful to me, and we perpetuate this cycle ad nauseum. So they're like, we have to fix this one. Which is an odd thing to be aware of, that people are trying to fix you, but there really isn't any other explanation when once a day, or once a week rather, during my favorite period, English, they're pulling me out of class to talk to psychologists and other civil servant-y type, like counselors and advisors. They had me take an IQ test. I don't know what they were hoping to solve with that one. I don't know what the IQ guy was contributing, if he was just gonna whip out his paper and be like, well, his IQ is, oh, it's 666. This is the problem. You got a Satan. He is Satan. That's the problem. Like, I don't know. I'm picking on this guy too much. It was probably a package deal. You get the counselors, you get the psychologists, and they're all working on me, asking questions, giving me, it's the only time in my life I've ever had a Rorschach test. I've had multiple counselors. They all looked like bugs to me. I don't know what value they got out of that either. So I'm doing this, I'm being pulled out of, you know, my favorite class, and I'm taking all these tests, and I'm very aware that they're trying to figure out what's wrong and get this aha moment, like, that's it. But there is no aha moment. I'm just kind of an asshole as a kid. The one person who had anything to say was the handwriting specialist. Again, I don't know what she was contributing to this exercise, which was that I wrote wrong, she concluded, and so they gave me this little granite weight to put on my pen or pencil, which was supposed to help me write better, but all it did was like slide up and down and knock me in the hand, and then I'd get frustrated and I'd hit me in the head, and it's just miserable. So they give up on this endeavor. They let me go back to class. But about a month later, all those counselors write up everything that they had done, and they give my parents this big report, because you kind of have to after that much effort. And I take the report. I don't know if I was allowed to look at it or not, but I took it, and I did. And I'm reading through all these things, you know, what the IQ guy said, nothing. What the psychologist said, blah, blah, blah. And I get to this point where it turns out they interviewed my teachers. And the teacher in that favorite class of mine who was giving me that positive validation wrote that Zach is a bully. Which was fair. But she didn't say anything about, like, Zach gets picked on. She just focused on the fact that Zach is a jerk, which I was. And when I read that, when I got into high school, I decided to just be nice to everyone, no matter how mean they were to me. And I just sort of blunt forced my way through 4 years. And then by the 4th year, I did have a lot of genuinely great friends who I'm really happy I have. And it's kind of weird as I roll it over in my head in front of a crowd, because it's like, it worked. But like, I'm still kind of like, I don't know what to make of my favorite teacher calling me an asshole, making me a better person means. I know this funny story kind of ends on a downer. I don't have a joke for the end, other than I'm less of a turd now, I hope.
Thank you, Zach. I was also an asshole turd. There are other kinds of turds. I once saw my cat puke a turd out of its mouth. So there are definitely other kinds of turds. That's right. Our next storyteller has told many wonderful stories here at Madison Story Slam. She's always good for a good story, if that makes sense. Please put your hands together for Gwyneth DeLopp.
So a little bit about me. I've lived the past few years in cooperative housing. Some veterans here. Interestingly, my co-op is in the Langdon neighborhood, AKA Frat Row. Now, you might think initially that this is a little bit of a contradiction, but hear me out. Co-ops and frats are very similar. We're both very cult-like. We both are trying to build community. We just have very different approaches to succeeding in that. Co-ops believe in like small-scale democracy and like food sharing and like heart circles. And frats believe in like hazing and all dressing in the same outfit, but we have the same end goal. So I wasn't all that concerned when I moved into a co-op in the Langdon neighborhood. And when I moved in, I was moving in with the people who were doing student rush. So everyone was in the same outfit. I learned all the chants through my window, and I got to see all of the very concerned dads moving their daughters in. And this was very funny to me. Because I'm just like, what are they concerned about? That I'm going to like give their daughter like tofu or like tell them to stop shaving their legs? But we had our own concerns about the frats, right? There is the noise and the glass and the drinking. But I thought, you know, it's gonna be fine. We can all live together in harmony. So I kind of just ignored them. And the first Sunday of every month, our house gets together and we do a deep clean together to all contribute to the house and build community. And it was a beautiful September day. It was really hot. We live right on the lake, so we decided to clean all of our porches. We were all sweating, and we thought it would be really nice to go and have a swim together. So I go down, you know, with my 3-year-old housemate, my 60-year-old housemate, and we're having a good time, hanging out. And you know, if you go out farther enough, you like don't really hear the frat music and like the cheering and everything. And I was like, it'll be fine. And I'm enjoying the view until I hear from behind me, if you need to vomit, vomit over the railing. And then I turn to the frat that's next to my cooperative, and they have a really nice porch that goes right up and right next to the lake. There's about a 20-foot drop right into the water. And I turn around and I deduce that they are doing a drinking competition in which all the guys rushing for this frat need to drink as much beer as possible. And at a certain point, if you want to drink more beer than the next person, you have to throw up the beer that you have already drank. So we stand there and we watch as one by one, all of the guys begin to projectile vomit 20 feet into the water that we are all standing in. And we stand there for quite some time. And one of my housemates turns to me and says, "Do you think the vomit is going to change the acidity of the lake?" My other, more practical housemate turned to me and said, "How long do you think until the vomit reaches us in the water?" At which point we decide to get out of the water. And as I'm walking up the hill, one of the frat bros comes to me and he says, "Do you want a beer?" And I said, "You know, I will accept your beer on one condition, and that's that I get to throw it up on your lawn." And he declined. He declined. So my dream that we could live together in harmony was shattered. And this year we actually just planted a row of shrubs between us and them so we can both live our separate ideologies in the same neighborhood. Thank you.
It's harmony. Thank you, Gwyneth. Our next storyteller, Dial, right? Right, what's your first name? Sorry. Helen. All right, Helen, you've never told a story here before, right? Perfect. Our next storyteller has never, is it dial or tile? Tile like the floor. It's a weird spelling. It is. Our next storyteller has a weird spelling of her last name. Please put your hands together for Helen Tile.
All right, so I'm going to tell you about my older brother. So I have two brothers. My older brother's name is Rain, and he's the sort of main character of this story. So as we were kids growing up, me and my older brother were really close, mostly because we were like about a year apart, and then my younger brother is like 4 years younger than me. And so he got to do like all the cool stuff way before we got to do the cool stuff, because like, you know, your parents get a lot more relaxed about letting your kids do cool stuff. So we were always kind of like, psh, this is really lame, you know, kind of banding together against him. But in like a nice way, hopefully. So anyway, we were close. And then as we grew up, me and my older brother, we started, you know, not being as close. He developed a lot of like learning disorders that made him really hard to live with, just in sort of a general sense. He had dyslexia and ADHD, and he had to take these like weird pills for them that made him dry heave like all the time, which was not enjoyable. Plus, he's just kind of like a weird dude anyway, so he's already like playing D&D and like getting really into it and then like dry heaving on the side. So it's kind of like, it's not a good combination. So all of this paired with him, like, he is a very sort of verbose type of person and really stubborn. So with all of these learning disorders, he wasn't doing very well at school, even though he's incredibly smart. He just can't really work with the school system. So he got into a lot of arguments with my dad, like all the time when we were growing up, and it made for a really sort of tense, like high school experience, to the point where, you know, I was just getting so angry with him all the time. I remember like writing really melodramatically in my journal, like, I wouldn't care if he died tomorrow, like, of course, like I would care now. But at the time, it made me really irritated that, you know, I'm this maybe middle child syndrome sort of thing going on of like, oh, my stinking older brother, if he were just out of the house, like everything would be great and we would be a great, happy family. So then, after all this time of me not really getting along with my brother anymore, he decided, of all things, to go into the military, which my entire family was really shocked about. Again, we have this weirdo kid who's like staying in his room all the time, playing D&D, dry heaving and having like horrible migraines. Like, how in the world are you gonna go into the military? Turns out he was faking a lot of these weird, disordery types of things. Again, he's just a weird dude. So he got into the military. We were all really shocked and kind of a little bit hurt, especially my mom, as far as, you know, she had taken a lot of time to help care for him and find him special schools and things like that. So it was a big adjustment for the family, but I'm sitting there thinking, like, this is gonna be good. My older brother has zero discipline at all. If anybody can whip him into shape, the military can. So I totally support it. Family was not super happy about it, but what are you gonna do? So as he goes into the military, we start becoming closer again because he can't talk to anybody, like you have no phone when you're going through training, that sort of thing. So we start writing letters, which is actually really nice because it doesn't involve, talking to a person directly and you can see their face and remember how much you dislike them. You don't remember disliking them as much when you're just writing a letter. So that was really nice. So we got a little bit closer through that. And then the best thing that happened, I thought it was hilarious. He tried to date one of my best friends from high school. And on the first date, he took her to the Marine Ball, and he showed her what he thought was a really cool party trick, where he picked up a magnet he picked up a spoon without actually picking up a spoon. It just stuck to his fingers. What he had done was slice open his fingers, put magnets in them, and then sew them back up together. This is the first date, and he's telling my friend, oh, this is really cool. As a party trick, I don't know, weird dude, bringing that again. So at that moment, that was a sort of come to Jesus moment for me of, my brother is an oddball. He is not this bad person who fakes being sick to screw up my whole family and make us argue all the time. He's just a weirdo who can be nice, but just doesn't understand how people work in the normal world. So ever since that point, we've become a lot closer because I've been able to accept his just I don't know what you're doing out here in the world, but you're nice and we can drink together and gripe about stupid things that our family does. So it's a good time. But having that moment of sort of vulnerability, I guess, where he just doesn't know what he's doing, and hopefully I can help guide him through the normal world. It was a nice time. I felt very transformed by it, so thank you.
Thank you, Helen. I was convinced that you were going to say, we got closer because he cut me open and put magnets inside me. That's fucked up. John Morgan, where are you at? All right. Our next storyteller, I can confidently say, has never told a story here before, because I don't think you've ever been here before. I don't recognize you, at least. He says, no. But, as always, I'm always expecting great things, so please put your hands together for John Morgan.
Well, I didn't know there was a theme tonight, but serendipitously, the story I'm going to tell happens to fit the theme. So that worked out. This is a story I've never told before because it happened just last Tuesday. So last Tuesday, I went out to a bar to meet a woman who I'm acquainted with for a beer. I had a couple of beers and she never showed up, so I had one more and she still hadn't showed up. So I was preparing to leave, and a guy down the end of the bar hollered down and asked if he could buy me a beer. Well, I'm never one to turn down a free beer, so I had one more, and he came over and sat down beside me so he wouldn't have to holler at me. And he said, well, what do you want to talk about? So I started talking about something, and after a little while I realized that he's one of those guys, he knows a lot, but it doesn't make any sense because he can't put two facts together to make a thought, or put two thoughts together to make an idea. But I was trying to talk to him anyway. Then another guy comes over and sits on the other side of him, and he sort of joins in the conversation a little bit, and we're both talking to him, and he's talking to both of us. And finally, I finished my beer, and I thanked him for the beer, and we all left about the same time. And when I got out to the sidewalk, the other guy who had been talking to the guy between us was standing there, and we stopped and talked for a minute. He told me his name was James, and I told him my name, and we agreed that this guy didn't make a whole lot of sense. And then we looked down the street, down the sidewalk. There was this weird-looking guy standing there about 30 feet away under a streetlight, and he was just standing there staring at us. So we looked at him, and he looked at us, and finally James says, "Are you looking for a fight?" Well, I didn't think that was a very diplomatic thing to say, but what could I do about it? So we continued to stare at each other for a little longer, and finally James said goodbye, and he took off. And I had to walk home in the direction this guy was standing there in the street. But I didn't want to walk past him, so I waited for him to leave. And eventually he left, started walking away, and I started walking home, walking slowly so I wouldn't have to pass him. And then he slowed down. He walked slower and slower, and finally he stopped, so I had to pass him. And as I walked past him, he started walking along beside me. So I asked him his name. He told me. I asked him where he's from. He told me. So we made small talk. It was a long block. We made small talk till we got down to the corner, and I had to turn left, and he had to go straight ahead. So we said goodbye, and as we parted, he said, and this guy was a real mean-looking guy, and I could see pain and anger in his face. So I wasn't really afraid of him for some reason, though. And as we parted, and we were going our separate ways, he said, "Can I get a hug?" Sure. So I gave him a hug. And I told him it was nice talking to him, and I hope we meet again sometime. And he said that would be nice. So, but on my way home, I got to wondering, what if that guy someday becomes a mass murderer? Or maybe not, because somebody gave him a hug. That's my story. All right.
Thank you, John. I know about all of you, but I want John to read every audiobook that I have downloaded right now. Like, that's an amazing voice. Like, that's a voice that belongs on a Prairie Home Companion. For sure. 100%. Our next storyteller is somebody that so here's the thing. That was our third storyteller, but we only have 2 left, so we're just going to get through them and get through the night. Our next storyteller is somebody that I feel very comfortable with. I feel so good about putting these microphones up to a place where I can actually talk at them because he is my size. Or it's probably more that I am his size because I am his son. Our next storyteller he used to be a pastor, so he's used to talking into microphones and telling bullshit stories. Please put your hands together for my dad, David Rostad.
Before I begin, there's something that has been bothering me all night long, and I think he's actually left now. But you know the bald guy with the red beard? He kept calling his bald head a hairstyle. What is that? I mean, really? A hairstyle. Well, I have had many transformation moments in my life. Some of them have had to do with just intense spiritual situations. Some of them have had to do with more of a progressive change of thought and perspective. And I am so surprised tonight that nobody has shared a transformational moment that is a part of each and every one of the lives of everybody who's in this room. Puberty. I can remember as a young junior high kid wishing, longing, trying to bring on puberty. You know, I don't know how it is for women, but for men, at least in my era, you know, we didn't have those kind of individual shower stalls that they provide in high schools now. you got in a big shower room and there were 5 showers coming out of a pole and you showered with everybody. And there was always that one guy that somehow, and I think his dad gave him steroids to tell you the truth, but there was always that one guy who had hair underneath his arms. His pits were like bushes. And his crotch just full. And you were like, and you are this 6th, 7th grade kid going, I am bald. And you are longing for that moment when that first hair sprouts. And you daily check. Oh, shit. Oh, no. Oh. And every day at gym class, you have to shower with this guy who is like full-blown Neanderthal. And he has hair all over, and you're just like, oh no, I'm the abnormal one. And you don't see all the people that are just like you. All the people that don't have a single sprout of pubic hair happen at all. But yet, you're trying to will one to pop out. You're just trying to make that pubic hair pop out somewhere so that you can say, I am a man. I mean, at least you girls, at least back in my days of school, you know, in 4th or 5th grade, they take you down, well, in my elementary school, they take you down to the lunchroom and close all the shades during lunch hour recess. And they show you a film about having a period. And all the guys are outside the windows trying to look through the little cracks in the shades, trying to figure out what's going on. And every girl you ask after that won't tell you a damn thing. So here I am with one of my friends, Jesse Johnson. And Jesse is, you know, kind of a, well, I won't say it because if I say he's a creepy kid, then I'm a creepy kid too. And here I am with Jesse, and we're down in the village park. I grew up in a town of 1,200 people, so the park, when I say the park, there is only one park. That's all that there is there at this place. And so we're down at the village park. And what had happened somewhere in the midst of whether it was a week or a day, we had each sprouted one pubic hair. And we were so excited. One pubic hair had shown itself. We're not talking about under the arm hair, we're talking about pubic hair. Well, when you're that age, you have to prove it, you know? I mean, you can't just say you got a pubic hair. You got to prove it. So we lowered our trousers. And there was that lone pubic hair having sprouted sometime in the last week. And it was transformational.
Yeah, what do I got? I got pubic hair. That's what I got. You know, I get the joy every month of my dad being here, and I get the joy of hearing stories from his past and his youth and things I never would have known. And And truly, I call it a joy because one of the reasons I love Madison Story Slam is that because my dad comes every month, and usually if I need a story, he's like, hey, I got a story. So I get to hear from him in a way, like I said, he's a pastor, so I've heard him speak a ton. But at Madison Story Slam, I get to hear him speak in a way that I never got to hear him speak from the pulpit. And I can promise you that from the pulpit, he never talked about his pubic hair. I can also promise you that I never cared to hear about his pubic hair. That was weird, Dad. Especially when he started to like mime pulling down his pants. Because I'm over there. It kind of looked like he was actually pulling down his pants. Didn't like that. So sitting at that table over with me is my brother-in-law, Josh. And as my dad was talking about his pubic hair, he said, please give me 3 minutes. So I don't know what the hell this is about, but please put your hands together for Josh Beiser.
That's all right. Yeah, that's good enough. That's good enough. Thank you. I'm not going to try to be funny because middle school awkward moments, I had plenty of them. I was a little chubby, wore clothes too big. Now I wear clothes too tight. So I'm up here because actually I just want to let you guys know transformation comes in so many different ways. And for me, Adam transformed our family as well as my wife. What he does here, he does with passion, he does with love, he does with joy. And he was a blessing to our family. He was, obviously, my sister loved him with all her heart and brought him in. But the change and the transformation that both he and my wife brought into our family are incredible. I grew up in a family, and I still do. I live in the family that is very loving, very kind, very together. But there was an element of, it is our way. This is the way we do it. And not very warm and welcoming to another way. And what I want to let you guys know, what he presents here every night is a way for people to bring their lives and their way to the table and express it. And he and my wife both brought that into our family in a very true and a very real way. And I'm very appreciative of that. My wife did it first, and I appreciate her from the bottom of my heart. But Adam absolutely brought it in a different way. And I could not be more grateful that the Lord brought both of them into my life, and that Adam carries what he does with him on a daily basis and pours into it. So I'm only coming up here because I want Adam to know that after what he spoke of when he was on stage, I want him to know that what he's pouring into is making a difference, and it is changing lives, and it's allowing people to see things in a different way.
Feh. Last time Josh got up here, he talked about poop, so that's what I was expecting. There's a great story about a shower between him and his wife that I'll let him tell sometime. Fuck you, Josh. I swear every month there's somebody that tries to get me to cry up here. My wife is currently crying. Anyway, our final storyteller of the night has been here many times. She's told many stories. You're moving into the comedy scene, right? When it behooves you. Yes. It's a good word. Our next storyteller has been here many times, She told many stories that have always made me laugh. Many times they're shall we say, not family friendly with your language. But who the fuck cares? Please put your hands together for Shauna Youngdahl. Lower than that. Hold on. I need to reintroduce her because she's so fucking short. Please put your hands together for Shauna Youngdahl.
Well, I do need to bring a stool or just start to learn to walk in stilettos. No. Being 16 years old was a very interesting year for me. 16 was the year that I got my driver's license and managed to crash my dad's car twice in one weekend. I also failed my geometry class in high school that year. Who cares? It's just geometry. 16 was also the year that I found out that my brain doesn't really work that well. And as a side note, the correlation between my brain not working that well and failing geometry class aren't related. Geometry just sucks. When I was 16, of course, growing up, hitting adolescence, there's a lot of changes going on in your body, a lot of new experiences that you're finding out growing up. When I was 16, I started having these experiences with people that when I was interacting with them, I started noticing that I was missing out on a lot of pieces. Like, I'd be having conversations with people and I would just kind of be blanking out, just kind of like not present in the moment. I'd be having conversations and they'd be talking to me and I would kind of just zone out. You know, right away when you hear something like that, you'd be thinking, well, maybe the people just aren't that entertaining or you just don't want to listen to them. People kind of are boring sometimes, but this was happening quite a lot. I remember there was this one moment in my soccer practice where I was standing on the field and I remember I just heard my coach shouting at me repeatedly. And I only just heard his voice shouting, but didn't hear the words he was shouting at me until finally somebody tapped me and said, Shauna, wake up or pay attention. We're playing a game here. And so finally I brought this up to my mom and told her, I'm kind of blanking out a little bit from time to time, and I don't think this is normal. And so she brought me to a doctor, and we found out that I have obsessive compulsive disorder. Like right away I thought, I'm ADD, I'm just super distracted by everything. Of course everybody has ADD, put me on a plethora of pills, get me, centered and focused, but I have obsessive compulsive disorder. And with that, with my obsessions with what I do, I take things that I see, read, hear, whatever, and I have to do this weird pattern in my head that just, it's obsessive. I have to figure something out, and I can't stop doing it until it fits a perfect puzzle. And when I'm doing that, I'm completely focused on that one thing and distracted by everything else that's happening in front of me. When I found this out, I'm like, oh, that's great. OCD, why can't it be a fun obsession like I'm addicted to making healthy meals for myself? Or I'm addicted to watching YouTube videos that are very entertaining and becoming a successful comedian or something. Jesus, that's a shitty obsession. So right away, all the doctors were like, okay, we need to start getting you into therapy. We need to start talking this out. But then also right away, we need to start getting you on medication. But the thing with OCD is that you just don't have solely OCD. You also have things that trigger your OCD. So I also got diagnosed with anxiety and depression. I'm like, oh shit, yes, my list is just expanding. I'm so happy that I am this manic. So with all of these different things being described and prescribed to me, the doctors were trying to work out what my little cocktail of perfect medication was supposed to be to help me live a more focused and in-the-moment life. And now being in high school, still growing up and still trying to, adapt to being an adolescent, going to high school, living that life, and having to also be prescribed different medications to find out what works to be able to live a normal life is not an opportune time. So every time I would visit a psychologist to prescribe me something, they were just going into a barrel blind and said, let's test this one out and see if this works. And inevitably, something would go wrong. There were many times in high school where I was always a very good kid in school, but all of a sudden I started getting suspensions. I started acting out in the library of all places. I would go there and just start ranting about things, and the librarians would be like, you can't be shouting in the library. Just really strange situations would start happening, and then I'd get suspensions, or teachers would yell at me in class, and I'd be acting out and doing these really strange things. And so I would report this back to my psychiatrists and let them know, and they're like, okay, we got to change everything. Side effects aren't doing you well. Let's try this other cocktail of prescriptions. But then the same things just kept happening over and over. I would get into a fight with my mom, and I would do something really weirdly aggressive that would be very strange and scary to the both of us. And I'd be like, well, again, this cocktail of medications that nobody knows what's supposed to help me is not working. It's only hurting me. And so every time we would be going back to the doctor, it would just be, let's try something different. Let's try something different. And this happened during the entirety of my high school. So the entirety from freshman year to senior year was just kind of a blur, to be completely honest. As soon as I graduated from high school, barely, because I lost any ability to function properly and focus on anything, I graduated college with a 2-point-something GPA, and that is bewildering to me because academics are my biatch. I told myself, I can't live the rest of my life like this. I can't live the rest of my life just injecting medications that I don't know if this is going to help me, and I don't want to risk hurting myself anymore. I have obsessive compulsive disorder. I have anxiety, I have depression, I have all of this stuff. But I need to give this a shot living with it. So I stopped going to the doctor. And I weaned myself off of the medications appropriately, the best way. Do not ever just stop getting off medications, by the way. I weaned myself off. Everything was done appropriately. And I wanted to start living my life, accepting that this was who I am and managing my mental illnesses as a part of who I am, and being very present and accepting of this is what my life is, and trying to figure out how to coordinate everything that's going on in my mind, but focusing and living to the best of my abilities at the same time. Because if something is not going right, and there's an alternative that you can try and fix it and be yourself doing it on your own, and you can at least give it a shot, why not go out and do it? In this case, medications weren't working for me. I never had a chance to say, I have OCD, I have anxiety and depression. Let me just learn to live with it. Let me just say, is this the person that I am, and is this okay? Can I accept this, and can I work my life into this? Is this just who I am as a person? So it's been, 12 years since I've been off medication. I still have my obsessions, I still have anxiety, I still have depression, but it's who I am, and I've learned to grow and work with it. And this is not something that works with everyone, and if it's something that you're suffering from, absolutely always go and talk to someone and see what the best solution is for you, but always do, at the end of the day, what you feel is best for you. And in this situation, I wanted to transform away from all the external, suggestions and just throwing different things at me, things that just were not working. And I wanted to step away and say, maybe I just need to be me and see if just being fully me is my best solution. And I'm still here, and I'm still crazy as shit. But so far, it's going good. And I hope you're all doing okay with everything that's going on out there, too. Thank you.
Thank you, Shauna. So yes, we hope that you have been transformed tonight, and that the story, if you haven't been transformed tonight, fuck you. We hope the stories that you've heard tonight have at least, I don't know, not inspired, but like made you understand that transformation happens. And that you don't have to stay the same person that you are right now. I think that's the biggest thing we can learn from tonight. That like how we feel right now doesn't have to be who we are. I learned that through Madison Story Slam. I hope as you come and continue to be transformed by Madison Story Slam that you learn that who you are tonight doesn't have to be who you are. That's how I was transformed.